Okay, we were in Hot Tefillin, so last time we saw the whole Arachot of Aver who's patur from the Tefillin. Now this raises the question of what about Tisha B'Av? Or it just says here, Tisha B'Av chayav behen, and Tisha B'Av you're obligated in Tefillin. This is actually not so obvious because in siman taf kuf nun hey, the two are there brings a whole machloket on this. Just see it briefly. It says in siman taf kuf nun hey, abroad in the source pages, he says v'chatav adoni avi arosh מסתברא דחייב בתפילין, כיוון דאבל גופי לא מצטרא אלא ביום ראשון. דלא אחמיר תשעה באב מששת ימי אבלות. In other words, he says, we know an Avel is only exempt from tefillin on the first day. So he says Tisha B'Av is a day of mourning, but it's not like the first day of mourning, that the person has just died. It's like it's no more than the 6 days of Avelut, because it's a commemoration of something that's sad that happened, as opposed to the first day of Avelut, when that's the day that the person died or buried. So that's the most severe. So it's not at that level to exempt a person from tefillin. Okay. Okay, but he says, והרמי רוטנבורג כתב ונראה בתשעה באב אין להניח תפילין כמו ביום ראשון של אבל, שאין יום מר יותר ממנו, יום קביעת בכייה לדורות. So the Marami Rutenberg said you're actually exempt from tefillin on Tisha B'Av. Why? Because again, the source that in the Ved is patur from tefillin on the first day. The Gemara learns it out, v'acharita ki yom mar, that it's like the bitter day, the first day of the Vedut, which is the most bitter. So Tisha B'Av, which is a national day of bitterness, B'chiyah L'Dorot, it is at that level. In other words, he says the Maharam was trying to be melamed zchut on minhag Ashkenaz, which apparently was not to put on tefillin on Tisha B'Av. But he says, you should put on tefillin. Okay, here the Beit Yosef in Siman Taf Tunkei also quotes that the Ramban held like the Rosh, but הרמב"ם כתב מקצת החכמים נוהגים שלא להניח בו תפילין של ראש. נראה מדבריו שרשאי אדם להניח תפילין בתשעה באב, אבל שמקצת החכמים נהגו שלא להניח תפילין של ראש. It's a bit odd. The Rambam writes that some חכמים had the custom of not to put on specifically tefillin של ראש. In other words, tefillin של ראש, I guess because it was considered pe'er, that you adorned yourself with the tefillin של ראש, so they had the minhag not to put it on. Which is a bit strange because miman nafshach, if there is a mitzvah, then you have to put it on. That's not so clear. At the end, he says, "Na'agu ha'olam shelo la'aniach tefillin b'tfilat shacharit u'b'mincha menichim otam." Right, which, as far as I know, is the common custom nowadays, not to put on tefillin in the morning, but to put it on in mincha. Although I did see that written that some Sephardi communities have the custom to put it on even in shacharit.
And still have them on during Kinot or take them off beforehand?
What?
Even during the Kinot or take them off?
I don't know. It just says here, I have a Sephardi comments on Mishnah Berurah. It says here, מנהג בית אלה הניחם בשחרית כרש"י ורבנו תם, כמנהג הרש"ש, וכן המנהג ברוב בתי הכנסיות שבירושלים. I think this was in the past, not nowadays. וכן ראוי לנהוג, ומכל מקום אין נכון שבכנסת אחד חלקם יניחו תפילין וחלקם לא יניחו. They quote here from the כף החיים, במקום שלא נמצא מניין שמניחים תפילין בשחרית, עדיף תפי שיניח תפילין בביתו ויתפלל ביחידות, ואחר כך ילך לבית הכנסת לומר קינות עם הציבור. What's minhag Ashkenaz nowadays? To put on in mincha?
Yes,
I'm guessing. Yeah, all right. But apparently it seems like there was a minhag at some point not to put it on at all. The Shulchan Aruch just says briefly, ב'tisha b'av chayvin b'tfilin, and the Rama says, ayin lekaman siman kaf taf kuf nun hey.
Would the logic be that since Tisha B'Av is also called a Moed, so just as one of the reasons why we don't put on again because it's a Moed? I don't know.
It's mentioned that it's a moed. That's why we don't put on, we don't say tachanun on Tisha B'Av. But
that's right.
It seems like the primary reason not to put on tefillin is due to the avilut. That's sort of the logic to put it on in mincha, you know, when the avilut is slightly lessened. So you sort of indicate the avilut by not putting it on shacharit, and then you put it on mincha to fulfill the mitzvah. All right. Okay, next halacha, this is some bit of strange stuff. It's not so clear. The next halacha, shifting gears from avilut to a chatan. Okay, so let's see the Gemara on this. This is a Gemara in Masechet Sukkah. There, the context in the Gemara is, you know, that chatan is patur min sukkah, and from that the Gemara continues on to other mitzvot. So the Gemara here says, Tanu Rabbanan, chatan v'shoshvinin v'chol bnei chuppah pturin min atfila u'mitfilin v'chayavin b'kriyat shema. So what it seems from the Gemara is that the way it used to work is that the chatan, he had sort of this place where he used to sit all 7 days that they were partying, and he had the shoshvini used to sit in the chuppah. In other words, the chuppah, it's not like we have nowadays that we just do a chuppah, you know, just for the, you know, wedding ceremony itself, but they had this sort of chuppah that the chatan would sit there, maybe with his kala as well, and you had the shoshvini and all the people accompanying them, and they would party there for 7 days. Okay, so that's why the Gemara has a whole discussion that before that, whether chatan and shoshvinin, that they should be exempt from the sukkah. Why? Because they're unable to, you know, to celebrate the wedding properly if they would go into the sukkah. That's why they're allowed to remain in the chuppah. Okay, now based on this, the Gemara continues: chatan v'shoshvinin v'chol bnei chuppah turin min atfila u'min atfilin v'chayavin b'kriyat shema. So they're patur from tefillah and tefillin, but they are obligated in kriyat shema. Mishum Rabbi Shila amru chatan patur v'shoshvinin v'chol bnei chuppah chayavin. Now it's not clear what Rabbi Shila is talking about. Is he talking about tefillah and tefillin, that he's saying only the chatan is exempt, but everybody else is obligated? Or is he referring to kriyat shema, that he wants to say that the chatan is even patur mi kriyat shema, but shoshvinin v'chol bnei chuppah chayavin? Okay. Another question is, why are they exempt? Okay, so this whole Gemara is not so clear, and that's why there's a machloket rishonim on this. So Rashi here says, "Turim min atfilah mishum debayi kavana, umin atfilin mishum deshchicha shichrut vekalut rosh." According to Rashi, the reason they're exempt from tefillah and tefillin is because they're celebrating and they're unable to, you know, to become serious enough to put on tefillin, because tefillin you can't have a sechdat, you certainly can't have kalut rosh, and tefillah as well, you need kavanah, and they're unable to do so because they're so busy with their party. Okay, so why are they chayavin b'kriyat shema? The mitzvat kavanata eina ela pasuk rishon. יכולים ליישב דעתם שעה קטנה כדי לקרוא פסוק ראשון. Okay, in other words, kriyat shema, you don't need the kavanah for the entire kriyat shema. It's enough kavanah just to have in the first pasuk of Kabbalat or Malchut Shamayim, and that they are able, you know, just for those 30 seconds or however long it takes, they are able to focus. Mishum Rabbi Shila amru chatan patur mikriyat shema detarid u'shar bnei chuppah chavin. So according to Rashi, Rabbi Shila is going on what the Tana Kama said, chayavin b'kriyat shema, would seem to include the chatan, and Rabbi Shila is saying no, the chatan is exempt from kriyat shema. Now here Rashi says, okay, in other words, Rashi is saying there would seem to be a different reason to exempt them, and that is because of Osek v'mitzvah patur mina mitzvah. And if that's the case, it's not so clear, but it sounds like from Rashi that if we would apply the halacha Osek v'mitzvah patur mina mitzvah, then they should also be exempt even from kriyat shema. Okay? But these Tanaim do not hold of this principle of Osek v'mitzvah patur mina mitzvah. Actually, Osek v'mitzvah patur mina mitzvah is something that we will see. It's the next line in the Gemara that speaks about, let's say, Sofrei Stam, that they should be exempt from kriyat shema and tefillin, etc., because they're Osek v'mitzvah, and therefore they're patur mina mitzvah. So, and that's actually going to be the next seif in the Shulchan Aruch. But it sounds like what comes out from Rashi, that really all of this, if we hold by Osek b'mitzvah patur mitzvah, which was before what we paskin, that they should be exempt from all of these things, even from Kriyat Shema. Why? On account that they're osek b'mitzvah, and they should be patur min mitzvah. Okay, so that's what seems to be from Rashi. In other words, according to Rashi, we're saying there's sort of two reasons to exempt the Chatan and the Shoshbini. One is because due to their celebrations, they're unable to have the proper kavanah and seriousness for tefillah and tefillin. And then Kriyat Shema, yes, because it's just one verse. Okay, and on that, even that, there's a machloket that according to Rabbi Sheila, the Chatan is exempt from Kriyat Shema. But there's another reason to exempt them because they're a second mitzvah, patur min mitzvah. You know, they're second the mitzvah of nisuin or pruvu or something like that. And therefore they should all be exempt, and maybe that's another reason we should exempt them, and then we would exempt them entirely, even from Kriyat Shema. Okay, that's what comes out from Rashi. Okay, Tosfot here disagrees. Let's see the Rosh rather. Okay. So the Rosh says, he first quotes Rashi. He says, Mishum Rabbi Sheila amru hachatan patur v'shoshvinim v'chol bnei chuppah chayavin. Hanei Tanai, I'm sorry, he disagrees with Rashi. He says as follows. Hanei Tanai itlu da'osek b'mitzvah patur min ha'mitzvah. אלא דתנא קמא מחייב להו בקריאת שמע משום בעיקר כוונת קריאה בפסוק ראשון, ובקל יוכל לכוון וליישב דעתו בפסוק ראשון. ורבי שיילי סבר דחתן אי אפשר לו לכוון דעתו כלל. In other words, according to the Rosh, really, these Tanaim do hold of העוסק במצווה פטור מן המצווה. So if so, then lechora, then comes the question of Rashi. So why are they obligated in Kriyat Shema if they're osek b'mitzvah? They should be patur min mitzvah even from Kriyat Shema. So what the Rosh here says, and this is something that we'll get into when we get into the sugya of osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah, he says that osek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah is not like a blanket exemption. Okay, I'm busy with a mitzvah, so therefore I'm exempt from everything. Rather, it's only if this mitzvah is really, somehow preventing you, because you're engaged in one mitzvah, it's somehow preventing you from, dedicating yourself now to doing another mitzvah. However, if you can do the other mitzvah easily, okay, in other words, okay, it's not going to ruin your celebration if you stop just for a moment and have kavanah for pasuk rishon, so it's not going to ruin your mitzvah of celebrating the chuppah, so therefore you're obligated. And Rabbi Sheila says no, Chatan is so taurud he can't. Okay, but then the Rosh continues. רבי שילה לא כאמר דשושבינים ובני חופה חייבים אלא בקריאת שמע, אבל בתפילה ותפולין מודד פטורים, ולא משום דעסיקי במצוות נינו, אם כן אפילו מקריאת שמע נמי נפטרים, אלא ודאי לא מקרה עוסקים במצוות, והדפטירי מתפילה משום דשכיחי בחופה שמחה וקלות ראש. והדפטירי מסוכה משום דאילו אחד ובהחתן מצטערין היו, והלכה כרבי שילה בחתן patur mikriat shema. So now the Rosh, and this is a bit strange, but now the Rosh sort of backtracks from what he said, and he said really actually the ptur of shoshbinin is not because they're osek b'mitzvot, but rather again he goes back to Rashi's reasoning that because they're unable to concentrate. But Kriyat Shema, it's only one verse that they are. Okay, so there's a difficulty here in the Rosh, here in the commentators of the Rosh, there's a long arichut to try to resolve. Also, this line of Alachaki Rabbi Sheila is not so clear. Not everybody has this here. Okay, what does the Tur come out from all of this and say? By the way, the Rambam does not bring any of this in Alachan, Chatan, and Shoshvinim. He doesn't bring this in Alachan that they're exempt. Okay, so let's see. First of all, the Tur and the Beit Yosef. So the Tur just says Chatan v'Shoshvina v'chol b'nei chuppah. So he rules like Tanakama. That's why some claim that maybe this, what the Rosh here said, that the Alachaki Rabbi Sheila, the Tur didn't have this girsa, because then how could he, rule against his father? That they are obligated in Kriyat Shema. Okay, the Beit Yosef, however, says here, he quotes the whole Gemara, and he says, "V'Rambam lo katav dechatan patur min atfilin, b'shar shu bichlal." מה שכתב, מצטער ומי שאין דעתו מיושבת עליו ונכונה פטור מן התפילין. Okay, another answer could be that the Rambam writes that anybody who's exempt from Kriyat Shema is exempt from tefillin. So he also says that Chatan on the first night is exempt from Kriyat Shema, then he should be exempt from the tefillin, but he doesn't say anything about the Chatan being exempt all 7 days. I don't think that would really answer, maybe for some reason the Rambam rejected this in the Mara Ba'arafa. Okay. And then he quotes the Rosh, and he says, הוא פסק הראש הלכה כרבי שיילה, ולפי זה נראה שמה שכתב רבינו בקריאת שמע לא קאי אלא שושבינים ובני חופה ולא החתן. ויותר נראה לומר, דגם חתן קאי ואתה משום דרבי שיילה דפטר לחתן, היינו משום שאי אפשר לכוון דעתו. אם כן היינו לדידו, והיו מכוונים, אבל בזמן הזה שאפילו שאר כל אדם אינו יכול לכוון, גם החתן חייב, הוא כמו שכתב בסימן עין. So the Beit Yosef wants to explain the Torah as follows. He says, they're exempt from tefillah and tefillin and chayavin b'kriyat shema. Why is even the chatan chayav b'kriyat shema? Why? Because the whole reason we say chatan is exempt is because he's unable to be mechavid. But we say later on in Ilchot Kriyat Shema that nowadays we're never able to have kavana. So because of that, that's actually a reason not to exempt the chatan, because it would be as if you're saying, oh, every day I have kavana, it's only today that I'm, getting married that I don't have kavana. Because of that, they say even the chatan should say Kriyat Shema, because nowadays we're never good at having kavana, and therefore we sort of lose the exemption, because it's no worse today of the marriage than any other day, and maybe that's why the tour here says that they are obligated in Kriyat Shema. Okay, and that's what he rules in the Shulchan Aruch as well. He says, Chatan v'shoshvina v'chol bnei chuppah turim, they're exempt from tefillin mishum d'shichrut v'kalut rosh. Okay. Now here comes an interesting development on this point, and in a Tshuvat Ramah, he was asked that we don't see this minhag. We have a chatan getting married all the time, and the chatan and the shoshvinim, they always put on tefillin and they daven, right? So it seems to go against this halakha. So he was asked about this in Tshuva Ramah, and he gives a very interesting answer. This is in Shut Ramah siman kuf lamed bet. He says as follows. So he brings the whole thing, and he says, Yim ken kashe. He says, so he asks as follows. He's going to לפי מה יסביר עליהם דחתן חייב בקריאת שמע בזמן הזה, כמו שכתב בטור, מטעם שאין כולם מתכוונים, right, nowadays that we say the chatan is obligated in Kriyat Shema because anyway we don't have kavana, so there's no reason to exempt the chatan because of a lack of kavana. ואם כן, המאי לא ישתמט שום פוסק, לומר דחתן חייב גם כן בתפילה ותפילין מהייתם. So according to this logic, we should say, since anyway we don't have kavana, but we still daven, we still put on tefillin. So a chatan as well. ואם יש טעם לחלק ביניהם מכוח קריאת שמע דאבי קבלת עול מלכות שמיים, מה שאין כן בתפילה, אם כן יש לתמוע על המנהג לנוהגים דאף חתן נוהג להתפלל או להניח תפילין ביום חתותו. וכל שכן שושבינה ושאר בני החופה. That was the question the Rama was asked. לכאורה, ממה נפשך? What's going on here? Should the chatan put on tefillin? Should he not? Do we say that there is this concern of a lack of kavana, or there isn't that concern, or anyway nowadays we don't have kavana? So the Rama gives an interesting answer, and he says as follows: לא ידעתי שלקחה בזה. שהרי טור כתב, כל הפטורים בקריאת שמע פטורים בתפילה. לכל החייב, ממילא חייב בתפילה. אם כן, חתן שחייב בזמן הזה בקריאת שמע, מטעם שכולנו אין מתכוונים בזמן הזה, הוא הדין שחייב בתפילה מהייתם. So first of all, he says, אנכי נמי. If the chatan is obligated in קריאת שמע, because anyways, nowadays we don't have kavana, so we don't have exemptions for lack of kavana, then that should apply to tefillah as well. It says, וכל שכן בני החופה ושאר שושבינים, גם בתפילין חייבים. שאף אגב דתנינם שפטורים מן התפילין, שם אין לחלק בין ימיהם לזמן הזה דלאו בכוונת על ימיתה. Right, so tefillin, it's not because of a lack of kavana, right? As we said, it's because of shichrut, or because of osek v'mitzvah, so that should apply nowadays. He says, מכל מקום נראה מאחר שקוראים קריאת שמע ומתפללים, חייבים גם כן בתפילין. והכל הקורא קריאת שמע בלא תפילין, כאילו מעיד עדות שקר בעצמו. ועד כאמר בגמרא דפטורים מהתפילין, היינו בימיהם שהיו מנדחים התפילין כל היום בלא קריאת שמע. ולזמן קריאת שמע, מאחר דחייב בקריאת שמע, חייב בתפילין שלא יהיה כמעיד עדות שקר בעצמו וזה מבוא. So what the Rama wants to say is as follows. He says, really, they are exempt from tefillin, but because we say nowadays that they should put on Kriyat Shema, they have to put on tefillin during Kriyat Shema, because otherwise we said you can't say Kriyat Shema without tefillin, because it's like you're testifying falsely against yourself, right? Because in Kriyat Shema you say, and you don't have a time. Okay, so now he asks himself, so if so, then how could the Gemara have said that they're Chayavim Kriyat Shema and Patur from Tefillin? So he says, no, what the Gemara meant, obviously when they say Kriyat Shema, they had to put on Tefillin during Kriyat Shema so that they won't be made to do Sheker. What the Gemara was saying that they're Patur from Tefillin is after they finish saying Kriyat Shema, because in those times they would continue to wear Tefillin all day, then they would take the Tefillin off, but not that they wouldn't put on Tefillin even during Kriyat Shema. Okay? All right.
Rav Liznat, would this also, I'm always asking this. In Germany, sometimes during the winter time,
Right.
where Zman Kriyat Shema and Tefillin is already very, very late, and sometimes you have to go on the road. I like to as the army. So sometimes I need to daven, obviously after Aleph Shacha, before I go out. So, but it's still not yet time for tefillin. So in that case, b'shas l'chak, it's already time for tefillah. So you could theoretically daven, but it's not yet. So I usually follow the opinion to daven without the tefillin, and then later on put on tefillin and read Shema again. Just
Right.
Would you agree on this?
I'll need to look into it. I think we didn't. I don't remember if we didn't discuss it back when we did the.
Yes. I don't recall.
Okay, I don't recall either. I mean, there is, if you are able to put on tefillin later.
Yes. It's yes.
Right. I think that makes sense. I'll try to recheck it. Again, there is logic to say, if it's not yet Zman Tefillin, then it wouldn't be considered like maybe do check it, right?
Maybe.
By saying Kriyat Shema at that time, like Kriyat Shema Shel Elvita. We also don't have that issue.
At the same time, we say that basically every time is Zman Tefillin.
Midoraita, that even Laila Zman Tefillin.
Right.
Right, but Lemaisa Chachamim said,
yeah.
Okay, I have to. I don't remember. I have to go back and check. I think
what most people do in the winter is they put on tefillin during Mincha and repeat Shema.
Reach Shema at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall. I have to go back to that. That was in siman way at the beginning, I think. Okay, B'ezrat Hashem, I look at that again. But siman Namid. All right, Trina there. I'll look that up again. But anyway, getting back to here. So that's the chidush of the Rama. That he says basically, since we're obligating the Chatan to put on Kriyat Shema, then Mimele, he will also have to put on Tefillin as well, and that's the explanation for Amin having nowadays that we put on Tefillin. Okay, here the Magen Avraham, he doesn't like this Rama. He disagrees with this. It says, you see from the Gemara that they were obligated in Kriyat Shema, but they still were exempt from Tefillin. Okay, and he says, "V'lo amrinan demida do checker b'atzmo, even shepatu mida dehave Shabbatot v'yamim tovim v'leilot." Right? He says it's not considered a do checker. Why? Because you're exempt from tefillin. When is it a do checker? When you say Kriyat Shema without putting on tefillin, when you're chayav with tefillin. But if you're exempt from tefillin, just like at night or on Shabbat and Yom Tov, so then it's not considered a do checker. So saying Kriyat Shema should not be a reason that you would be obligated in tefillin. Okay. Now he wants to come up with a clever answer, and he said, right? He says it could be that the Gemara, when the Gemara said chayvim b'kriyat shema, it was only referring that they would have to say the first verse, like Rashi said, that they're able to have kavanah just from the first verse. But he says also that's not the pshat. He says, Rashi, other words, Rashi didn't say that they would only say the first verse of Kriyat Shema. They would say the entire Kriyat Shema, but it didn't matter if they didn't have Kavanah, if they only had Kavanah during the first verse. Okay, and therefore he says that if, let's say, his conclusion is that, if they're in the middle of the celebration, the Chatan, and there's a lot of dancing and drinking, etc., really that the Chatan and his Shoshavinim are exempt from Tefillah and Tefillin, apparently. Okay, Mishnah Berurah, however, the Mishnah Berurah, he says, Chatan v'Shoshavina v'chol b'nei chuppah p'turim mishum d'shlichi shichut v'kalut rosh. So here the Mishnah Berurah says, he quotes here the Tshuvat Rema. First of all, he says, "V'dafka b'mkom ha'chuppah d'sham shliach shichut v'kalut rosh," right, which was again the customary at the time, that they would continue to sit in the chuppah the entire week. And he says, "Turim b'tshuvat Rema siman kuf lamebet katav da'idna she'af ha'chatan chayav b'kriyat shema b'tfilah. Imele chayavim ha'chatan v'chol b'nei chuppah gam b'tfilin." Right, as we said, so that he won't be made to do chicken. ואין במגן אברהם שמפקפק בדינו, ומצדד לפסוק השולחן ערוך דפטורים מתפילין ואת המשתה, that if they're in the middle of drinking and celebration that they are exempt from תפילין. וגם לעניין תפילה מקל כדעת רש"י לפתור בעת המשתה לא הפסיד אם החתן יסב אצלם. ואז המצווה לדעת רש"י. אבל בדברי הגר"א בביאורו משמע שאין להקל לעניין תפילה. In other words, the graph says not to be lenient. ועיין בעולה תמיד וברכי יוסף שכתבו ונתפשט המנהג כערמה והחתן וכל סיעתו קוראים ומניחים תפילין, מתפללים מיום הראשון ועד יום השביעי. Okay, in other words, he says that the custom has been, here also you can see in the parahativ, he said, וכן נתפשט המנהג בזמן הזה, בארצות אלו דחתן וכל בני החופה קוראים ומתפללים. Okay, so despite this halacha that appears in the Gemara, and it's at least brought by many Rishonim, the minhag is not like this. The minhag is that the Chatan and everybody, the whole party, they all continue to put on tefillin and daven regularly during the entire Shivat Yemei HaMishteh. Okay, as I mentioned, it could be, again, it's not so clear to me why, but the Rambam doesn't bring this halacha, so it could be that this minhag also fits in with the opinion of the Rambam as well. All right, very good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all right, very good. Shkoyach to everyone.
Thank you so much.
Break for Pesach. And the week after Pesach, it's okay to resume?
I have to be honest, the 2 weeks after Pesach, the first week I will be most probably visiting Africa, one of